The old Grand Tutor predicted that the Marquis of Yeoman's heir was destined for a calamity and wouldn't live past 20. Struck by 7 arrows, the heir, with only a breath left, was saved. The old Grand Tutor then said if he luckily avoids the calamity, he must pledge himself in marriage to repay the kindness, to resolve the karma, and continue to live. The heir's family, carrying a jade pendant and lavish betrothal gifts, entered the humble residence of a 6th-rank official in the capital. My legitimate elder sister appeared before the heir 1 step ahead of me, took the jade pendant, and claimed the identity of his savior. Father and mother were overjoyed, praising my legitimate elder sister and the heir with all sorts of kind words. They completely forgot that my legitimate elder sister knew nothing of medicine. I stood behind the screen, stroking the scar on my face. I did not rashly step out to clarify the truth. In my previous life, I married Chui Bin as I wish. My legitimate elder sister was scorned in the capital for fraudulently claiming the identity and was driven out of the capital that very day. But in the 2nd month after my marriage, Chui Bin set fire, burning me alive in the room. He only did it to avenge his beloved legitimate elder sister, cruelly treating his savior. Now, reborn into this life, I will bring this pair of lovers to fruition, letting them share the same bed in life and the same grave in death. Without my interference, Chui Bin and Feng Yao's engagement proceeded smoothly. After exchanging their birth dates, Chui Bin casually asked,
I heard there's also a 2nd young lady in your household.
Mother's smile instantly vanished. She pursed her lips.
A child who can't be presented in public, lacks manners, and might offend nobles.
Father gave an awkward, forced smile.
Today is Yao Yao's big day. Let's not mention others. Let's not.
I was clearly Feng family's biological daughter, yet father's single sentence made me an outsider. Chui Bin's gaze turned towards the screen. Since we're family, we should meet. Feng Yueyao sensed something was wrong. She quickly stood up and walked to the screen. Oh, why is my sister's maid eavesdropping here? Mother followed with a scolding. Aren't you going to go receive your punishment? Feng Yueyao glared at me fiercely. She was on high alert, guarding against me rushing out to tell Chui Bin the truth. I lowered my head and obediently left. Feng Yueyao watched my retreating figure in surprise. They hadn't expected that I would be so cooperative. Before Feng Yueyao came out to claim the jade pendant, Mother's uncharacteristically gentle tone brought me food and drink, wanting to keep me in my room. In my previous life, I indeed did not cooperate. Father and mother never doted on me and were rarely kind to me. I sensed something was amiss and ran behind the screen to eavesdrop. The Marquis of Yeoman's residence. This was a prominent and wealthy family in the capital. To be associated with such a family was a dream father and mother never dared to have in their lives. Feng Yueyao was at the age for marriage proposals. Mother had already found a top scholar for her, but upon hearing that the Marquis's residence was proposing marriage, she didn't say a word and immediately put forward the beautiful Feng Yueyao. From childhood to adulthood, in my memories, father and mother always favored Feng Yueyao. My temperament was not likable, unlike Feng Yueyao, who was good at pleasing father and mother with her words. I had a scar on my face. Because of this, father and mother refused to look me in the eye. But this scar, it was when I was 6 years old, to save Feng Yueyao, who had fallen while climbing a tree, that I got it. Recalling past events was too painful, ugly to look at. Without my interference, how far could Feng Yueyao go? The 2nd day after the engagement, early in the morning, the Marquis and his wife brought Chui Bin to the Feng family. I was also called to the front hall. The Marquis sat in the main seat, his face livid. Father, mother, and Feng Yueyao knelt on the ground. Chui Bin stood beside Feng Yueyao, a look of displeasure on his face. I timidly hunched my shoulders. Just as I was about to kneel, I was pulled up by the Marquis. You must be Qinglan. This child looks very pleasing to my eye. Mother, I will not marry her. Zhai Xing's tone was firm. Zhai Kai's tone was firm. No matter what the imperial advisor says, I only recognize Feng Yueyao as my savior. I will only marry her. The Marquis slammed the table and angrily reprimanded him. Rebellious son, the imperial advisor said it himself. Feng Yueyao's birth characters and yours are a doomed relationship, and Qinglan's birth characters are truly connected to you by fate. Chui Bin stiffened his neck, unconvinced. The imperial advisor also said I wouldn't live past 20. Now that he sees I'm alive, he changes his words. I think what he says isn't worth believing at all. Father, please believe your son. Yueyao will be a good wife. Without her, your son would truly find it hard to cope. Only then did I understand the whole story. The Marquis and his wife took Feng Yueyao's birth particulars to the imperial advisor, hoping for good fortune and peace. Unexpectedly, they learned that the birth characters were incompatible. The Marquis, feeling deceived, came to the Feng residence early in the morning. He asked my parents for my birth characters and immediately sent someone to consult the imperial advisor. After the imperial advisor interpreted the characters, that's why I appeared in the front hall. Chui Bin painstakingly, the entire process of Feng Yueyao saving him, explained very clearly, causing the Marquis to waver. Father, your son cannot be mistaken. We cannot just because of birth characters. Don't let your son miss the person he truly cares about. If you insist on me marrying Feng Qinlan, then your son can only make a concession. I'll marry her as a concubine. The imperial preceptor only said to offer oneself but didn't specify a rank, but concubine to the heir isn't too bad. The Marquis continued to waver. His expression softened slightly. Marquis, actually, Feng Qinlan is not this official's biological daughter. That year, my wife had a difficult labor. The child, as soon as it was born, was gone. This official couldn't bear to see my wife heartbroken, so I adopted a child from outside and casually made up a birth character to register her. No wonder that child was born with a mark, not resembling me in the slightest. My poor biological daughter. My parents' lifelong cleverness was all used here. I numbly listened as they denied my identity. Once a lie begins, once an absurdity begins, it's not hard to continue. The two of them, one word after another, performed admirably, describing me as a greedy, lazy, useless girl. Such a person as I naturally wouldn't be qualified to be the heir's wife. That jade pendant, although this official gave one to each of my two daughters, Qinglan's had already been broken. They again denied the token I left for the heir. Feng Yueyao came back to her senses. Your humble servant remembers the day the heir was saved. Sister Qinglan and mother were at the temple worshipping Buddha. They stayed for 3 days straight and didn't leave. Everyone was denying my identity, but clearly they all knew in their hearts that I was the one who saved Shui Bin. I knew my parents favored Feng Yueyao, but I never expected such a baseless favoritism, and Shui Bin might have wondered in his heart who truly saved him. After seeing my and Feng Yueyao's appearances, he decisively believed Feng Yueyao's words and convinced himself that Feng Yueyao was the one who saved him. I did indeed accompany her to pray to Buddha. Unfortunately, she thought my appearance would offend the Bodhisattva, so she locked me in the room. She knew I left the temple at night, yet she deliberately said I was still there. Feng Yueyao has no medical skills whatsoever. Shui Bin's injuries were very serious, requiring stitches. It was I who bravely took the risk to try, and only then saved his life. He held my hand, saying he would marry me and cherish me for a lifetime. This deeply moved me, as I had little familial affection. No one had ever said they would love me for a lifetime. I never expected him to go back on his word. I tried to reason with myself, thinking that he would surely care about me once he knew the truth, but I never expected. Shui Bin was no good match at all. Fortunately, I have a chance to start over. I will certainly not make the same mistake. Marquis, aren't you going to ask me? I never said I saved the young master. I looked up, meeting the Marquis's gaze. My hand is injured. It's hard for me to even hold a pen. I raised my arm, rolled up my sleeve, revealing my bandaged right hand. Shui Bin's face lit up with joy, giving me an understanding look. He whispered, "If only you had been this honest in your previous life." The Marquis stared intently at me and Feng Yueyao, his gaze shifting between the two of us. Feng Yueyao, her legs weak, leaned against Shui Bin. I met his gaze silently, letting the Marquis speculate. The Marquis was well-traveled and experienced, realizing something was amiss, but no matter how he pressed, I denied it. Feng Yueyao gritted her teeth and admitted, "Marquis, I already have someone I admire. I had thought he was a poor hunter. Mother would surely be displeased. Now that it's known I am not the Feng family's daughter, it also serves as an explanation." I kowtowed 3 times to my parents. Qinglan thanks father and mother for their nurturing kindness. Now that I know my true identity, I shall not remain in the manor. I got up, turned, and prepared to leave. Shui Bin stopped me. "You're talking nonsense. The one you care about is me. There's no such thing as a hunter. Feng Qinglan, I can take you as my concubine. After all, you yearn for glory and wealth. I'll grant your wish." Then I raised my hand and slapped Shui Bin's face. "Young master, how can you casually slander my good name? Today is the first time I've met the young master. How could I care about you?" I squeezed out 2 drops of tears and stomped my foot. I stomped my foot before anyone could react. I swiftly ran out, escaping the Feng manor, hiding in a corner of the alley. I looked up at the sky, sobbing silently. In my previous life, I caused a huge scene in front of everyone. Though the Marquis trusted me, Shui Bin firmly denied it. Even when I recounted the entire process and filled in the missing details, Shui Bin had omitted. Even when Feng Yueyao couldn't say a word and stammered, making excuses that she'd forgotten, Shui Bin still only trusted Feng Yueyao. Father and mother saw that Shui Bin didn't like me at all. They helped Feng Yueyao deceive everyone, from the top down, just as they are doing now, denying my identity as the Feng family's biological daughter. They even deliberately injured my hand to drive me out of the Feng family. Now, I've done all of this myself. I will let them see that what is fake can never be real. Shui Bin and Feng Yueyao's marriage news spread. It sparked discussions among the capital's residents. Although Feng Yueyao was a daughter of an official family, her father's official rank was truly insignificant compared to the Marquis. Shui Bin was quite handsome. Countless young ladies in the capital admired him. Those with better family backgrounds than Feng Yueyao were even more numerous, taking advantage of everyone's curiosity. I sent people to widely publicize how Feng Yueyao saved Shui Bin, who was on his last breath. People loved to gather for a spectacle. The story of this life-saving grace grew more and more exaggerated with each telling. It ended up portraying Feng Yueao as a divine physician, a match for Huatua. Feng Yueao prided herself on her beauty and always loved hearing others praise her, but besides her face, she had no other redeeming quality. The overwhelming praise now made her dizzy, so dizzy that she became immersed in it, truly believing herself to be a divine physician. Cui Bin, however, felt this was inappropriate. Unfortunately, now in the capital, from the imperial family down to commoners, everyone was discussing it. He had no way to stop it. Feng Yueao was invited daily to banquets hosted by influential families and nobles. Everyone was curious, wanting to see this divine physician. People feared birth, old age, sickness, and death. They revered a divine physician who could bring the dying back to life. They all held her in high esteem. Feng Yueao sat in a place of honor. A casual word from her could cause, just a casual word from her could make the daughters of minor officials who once mocked her face difficult situations. She'd put on a smiling face and receive priceless, valuable gifts. When I heard Feng Yueao returning to the manor with precious coral, I finally left the capital. Content. Dealing with her directly would be too easy. To make her fall hard, she must first be raised high. A divine physician cannot merely have the title. They must also possess the real ability to save lives. I did not go far from the capital. I found a nearby temple to reside in temporarily, waiting for the commotion in the capital to continue to develop. Cui Bin and Feng Yueao's grand wedding was very lavish. On the mountain in the outskirts of the capital, I could even hear the sound of Swona. Let them blow. This is Feng Yueao and Cui Bin's last taste of prosperity. On the night of the second day after their marriage, I encountered a severely wounded man in the woods. Previously, I also met Cui Bin here. His blood flowed all over the ground. Arrows were stuck in his body. He only had one breath left, yet he managed to hold on, clutching my hand, begging me to save him. And this man's appearance surpassed Cui Bin's. He also reached out his hand, asking me for help. I wouldn't fall in the same place twice. I turned my head and left, but after walking 10 steps, I inexplicably softened. My master taught me medical skills, taught me to be compassionate, taught me that a healer should have a parent's heart. He pitied me for not receiving my parents' love, which is why he made an exception and took me as his disciple. I promised him I would pass on the medical skills in the future to save the dying and help the injured. Cui Bin's injuries were very severe. This meant trouble. After I passed by, I turned back and saved him, but I don't regret it. I hate Cui Bin for his betrayal and disloyalty, and I hate myself for trying to force a relationship that wasn't meant to be. But I never blamed myself for saving someone. I hesitated for a moment, but still turned back and walked to where the man was lying. This man's injuries were even more severe than Cui Bin. Perhaps it would still be a thankless task, but I really couldn't just stand by and do nothing. I gave the man simple first aid, using cloth strips to bind the critical areas to prevent excessive blood loss. I dragged him to a nearby cave, the same cave where I treated Cui Bin last time. I thought for a moment, then I bound the man's eyes to prevent him from seeing me. Fortunately, all the tools I used last time were still there, convenient for treatment. There was no anesthetic. When I used the blade to treat the wound, the man woke up in pain several times, then fainted again. Not until dawn was I able to remove the hidden weapons from the man's flesh. After stitching him up, I was also completely exhausted. If it weren't for your good looks, I wouldn't have saved you. I attributed my soft-heartedness to his face. I gave it a hard pinch. When I returned from the temple with some food, the cave was empty. It would have been fine if he had just left, but he just had to take all my tools with him. I angrily kicked the straw on the ground. Oh well, the fact that he could walk proved he survived. Something underfoot poked my foot. I picked it up and saw it was a jade pendant of decent quality. No inscription. I couldn't tell its origin. Last time I saved someone, I accidentally dropped my jade pendant. This time I saved someone, and I accidentally picked up a jade pendant. I'll keep it, considering it payment for the treatment. For several days in a row, I kept an eye on news from the capital, but I didn't hear the good news I expected. Feng Yueao still went out visiting conspicuously. Cui Bin still doted on her immensely, but I clearly remember that at this time in my previous life, a noble in the capital was gravely injured, as seriously as Cui Bin, barely clinging to life. The imperial physicians were at a loss. The old grand tutor suggested a method. The person who saved the prince's heir is the only ray of hope. An imperial decree ordered me to save him. Unfortunately, my hands were injured by my parents. I couldn't hold a scalpel steadily. I said I needed to perform an internal surgery. The imperial physicians scoffed at me, calling it wild fantasy and nonsense. It was also because of this incident that the Marquis no longer protected me. He believed I wasn't the one who saved the prince's heir. They wanted to find Feng Yueao. Unfortunately, Feng Yueao met with misfortune the day after my wedding. Cui Bin vented all his hatred on me. The Marquis ignored Cui Bin's abuse towards me. He let me suffer misfortune. I deliberately made Feng Yueao's medical skills praised as unparalleled and went to great lengths to build her reputation, all for this day. Why hasn't any noble been injured? Why hasn't anyone exposed Feng Yueao's true identity? Could it be that events after rebirth can also change with choices? I disguised myself and snuck into the princess's banquet while Feng Yueao was one of the invited distinguished guests. Today, the peonies at the princess's estate were in full bloom. Layers of gauze lanterns hung in the corridors. They swayed gently with the breeze, reflecting the fragrant silks and shimmering hairpins throughout the courtyard, yet also concealing unseen dangers. I changed into a plain gray cloth skirt. In my hair, I only wore a single wooden hairpin. I lightly covered the shallow mark on my face with some powder. Blending in among the maids and servants, no one really gave me a second glance. I came here for no other reason but to personally witness Feng Yueao shatter the halo she had built for herself, smashed to pieces on the ground. Inch by inch, I followed the sounds of voices and walked towards the main banquet. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed the expressions of the various ladies and young misses at the banquet. Miss Li, daughter of the Right Chancellor, held her teacup, her fingertips pressed slightly harder. Evidently, she was waiting to see Feng Yueao make a fool of herself. Several imperial clan princesses gathered together, whispering and laughing. Their gazes occasionally swept towards where Feng Yueao was sitting, with a hint of mockery and scrutiny. I sneered inwardly. Feng Yueao thought that with just a pretty face and a few lies, she could firmly hold the position of the divine Dr. Young Lord's consort. But little did she know that everyone in the entire capital was waiting to see how she would end up. I hadn't even gotten close to the person I wanted to confront when my arm was suddenly seized by a very strong hand. Before I could struggle, I was dragged into the shadows behind the rockery. My nose hit the hard stone wall. A dull pain assailed me. I was about to open my mouth and scream. A warm hand immediately covered my mouth, carrying a faint scent of ambergris and a hint of imperceptible anxiety. Qinglan, it's me. The familiar voice reached my ears. My whole body stiffened. My blood seemed to freeze instantly. It's Cui Bin. Has my plan been discovered? Has he already found out that I was the one spreading those rumors behind the scenes, elevating Feng Yueao into a revered divine physician? My heart was restless. My fingertips clenched until they turned white, keeping my head down, not daring to let him see the hatred and panic in my eyes. In my previous life, he was just like this, using a gentle tone to lure me into a cage, then pushing me into despair in the cruelest way. Now, the gentler his voice was, the deeper the chill in my heart became. Outside the rockery, I heard the footsteps of maids coming and going. The light and shadows of the gauze lanterns fell through the gaps onto the ground, flickering on and off, much like the turbulent emotions in my heart at this moment. I remember in my previous life it was also such a twilight. He also gently held my hand like this, saying that once he found out the truth he would marry me with a grand sedan chair. But then he turned around and dealt me a cruel blow. Those sweet words still echoed in my ears, but the scene was long unbearable to recall. Qinglan, I've been looking for you for a long time. These past 3 months, where have you been? Cui Bin's voice was very gentle, soft as a spring breeze. In my previous life, I only heard it during the month after our marriage. He did it to coax my feelings, so that when I cared about him the most, he would personally tell me that everything was fate, plunging me into despair. At that time, I still thought he was misled by Feng Yueao. As long as I told him the truth, he would turn back. Thinking about it now, it was just my wishful thinking, my foolish delusion. I trembled all over. Shrinking back, I used all my strength to resist his approach. My shoulder hit the rough stone wall of the rockery, scraping painfully, but I didn't even notice. I was afraid that if I opened my mouth, I wouldn't be able to stop myself from screaming out the pain of my previous life. Afraid I couldn't help but pounce on him and tear off his hypocritical mask. A few tiny ferns grew in the crevices of the rockery. They swayed from my movement. Droplets on the leaves fell onto the back of my hand, icy cold and bone-chilling, making me even more clear-headed. I am no longer the Feng Qinglan of my previous life, who yearned for family affection and craved love. In this life, all I want is for them to pay the price. Qinglan, are you doing well? Have you been wronged out there? Cui Bin took a step forward, wanting to touch my cheek. I sharply turned my head, dodging him. His hand froze in midair. A flicker of imperceptible displeasure flashed in his eye, but it was quickly covered by gentleness again. No matter what Cui Bin said, I bit my lip and said nothing. My lips turned pale from my biting, and I didn't even notice the slight bleeding. I just wanted to leave here as soon as possible, to see him and Feng Yueao suffer the consequences of their actions. I didn't want to be involved with him in the slightest. A moment later, a jingling sound of jade pendants came. Feng Yueao hurried over, holding up her skirt. The golden peonies embroidered on her skirt shimmered with a cold light in the shadows. Her exquisitely made-up face showed a mix of eagerness and impatience. She glanced at me, then immediately looked at Cui Bin. Time is running out. Have you convinced her? The princess is already pressing us. If we delay any longer, I'm afraid people will notice something amiss. After 3 months apart, seeing Feng Yueao again, she wasn't as glorious as I had expected. Her eyes showed deep dark circles. The area under her eyes was a dark purplish blue. Clearly, She had been sleepless for many nights recently. Although her face was covered in thick powder, it couldn't hide the haggardness in her eyes. The corners of her mouth subconsciously turned downwards, adding a touch of harshness to her look. I could tell at a glance that she was experiencing mood swings with a strong liver fire and suppressed heart fire. Her fundamental health was already damaged. Where was there even a trace of her former grace as the capital's beauty? She now seemed to be a high and mighty consort to the heir apparent, but in reality, she was already a spent force. Those ladies and young misses from influential families flattered her outwardly, but secretly, they had long since uncovered all her secrets, merely waiting for the right moment to pull her down from her pedestal. During these 3 months, I had already secretly sent people to collect evidence of her lack of medical knowledge, her mistreatment of servants, and her bullying by relying on her influence, just waiting to reveal everything today. Feng Yueao forced out a stiff smile, stepped forward 2 paces, and feigned intimacy as she grabbed my hand. Her fingertips were icy cold, but the force was terrifyingly strong. Little sister, you like your elder sister the most, don't you? You even said before that we sisters would always live together, sharing blessings and enduring hardships together. So, why don't you come to the heir apparent's residence? Your elder sister promises that no one will bully you. Her tone was filled with reluctance, and the smile on her lips was barely holding. Clearly, she was coerced by Cui Bin, which was why she had to lower herself to curry favor with me. I looked at Cui Bin in surprise. My mind already understood they must have encountered an unsolvable problem. Only then would they think of me, the person they had discarded like a worn-out shoe. A few days ago, the wife of a minister in the capital had a difficult labor, and the imperial physicians were at a loss. Her family, drawn by her reputation, went to invite Feng Yueao. She reluctantly went. The situation became critical. If it weren't for the assistant minister's wife's great fortune, she would have long since passed away. This matter was suppressed, but it made everyone in the aristocratic circles feel insecure. No one dared to seek her medical help easily again. Her reputation as a divine doctor already existed in name only. Cui Bin nodded lightly. His tone carried a hint of condescending generosity. Although you'd be a concubine, I will not treat you unfairly. I will treat you sisters equally. The food, clothing, and daily expenses in the man will never be lacking for you. Feng Yueao listened to Cui Bin's words, and the grip on my hand suddenly tightened. Her fingernails almost dug into my flesh. I deliberately cried out softly in pain. My eyes were slightly red. Sister, you're hurting me. Sister, I won't. Miss Feng, this humble maiden dares not covet the heir, nor dare I step half a pace into the Marquis' manor. I pulled back my hand, stepped back, and humbly lowered my head. My tone was full of humility, but my eyes held icy coldness. Cui Bin frowned tightly, pushed Feng Yueao aside, stepped forward and took my hand, carefully examining the red marks on my wrist. His tone instantly turned cold. You reprimanded Feng Yueao in a low voice. Didn't I tell you to be generous? Do you still want to live a peaceful life in this situation? Besides her, no one can help you. Feng Yueao's face turned pale, and she pursed her lips in displeasure, but bit her lip and held back her anger. However, the look in her eyes towards me grew even more resentful. She knew Cui Bin was speaking the truth. Now her reputation as a divine doctor was already crumbling. No one seeks her medical help anymore. Even noble families she previously slighted have spread rumors, intending to expose her true colors. Would my generosity be useful? She might not agree to help me. From childhood to adulthood, I was the one she hated most. She always went against me, vying for our parents' affection. How could she willingly help me now? I reminded her softly. Miss Feng, you just said I liked you most. How could you forget in the blink of an eye? Feng Yueao's gaze at me wished she could rush up and hurt me immediately. Only because Cui Bin was present did she forcefully hold back. Her chest heaved violently, clearly enraged by me. Cui Bin took a deep breath, looked at me, his tone carrying a hint of plea. Xinlan, I heard you know a little about medicine. Your sister is currently pregnant and feeling unwell. It's inconvenient for her to see patients. Can you take her place? Whatever your demands. Gold, silver, jewels, fertile land, mentions, I can satisfy you. I was stunned for a moment, biting my lip hard to keep the cheers in my heart from escaping. I thought Feng Yueao could hold on for a while longer. It seems she's already been heavily suspected and can't hold out. That's why she forced Cui Bin to come to me. No wonder she only attended this one banquet hosted by the princess in the past half-month. She must have had no choice but to come. This was clearly a banquet with ill intentions aimed at her, and she naively thought she was still the revered divine doctor, the crown prince consort. I remained impassive, my tone humble and timid. Miss Feng's medical skills are unparalleled in a world capable of miraculous healing. My meager skills are not good enough to be presented and certainly cannot replace my sister. After a pause, I added another line, every word striking at Cui Bin's sore spot. If Miss Feng is pregnant and cannot treat patients, just say so directly. Is there anyone in this world who would dare to trouble the young lord's consort? Being pregnant doesn't mean she can't move around. Why can't she treat patients then? Why must the young lord make things so difficult for a helpless woman like me? I scoffed inwardly. Cui Bin already knew for certain that Feng Yueao wasn't his savior, yet he was still happy to keep up appearances. He'd rather use me his true savior. As a stand-in, he still wanted to protect Feng Yueao, that imposter. By his side, he never cared about the life-saving grace. It was always just Feng Yueao's beautiful face and that ridiculous obsession in his own heart. He wants to use me and play me for a fool. Do you really take me, Feng Qinlan? I am still the same gullible fool from my past life, to be manipulated by anyone. Cui Bin, you've gone too far. I looked up at him. My gaze was calm and unwavering, yet it carried an undeniable resolve. Since you like to play games, then I'll play along with you. This humble maiden has been foolish since childhood and only has a superficial understanding of medicine. I have never saved anyone. How dare the young lord ask this humble maiden to replace Sister Feng? I deliberately stressed, never. The two words. My gaze fixed directly on Cui Bin. He cares most about his reputation. My words struck a nerve. He instantly flushed with shame, his face red to his ears, momentarily speechless, unable to utter a single word. Feng Yueao had already run out of patience. She didn't want to beat around the bush with me any longer. She directly revealed her true intention, her tone incredibly fierce. Stop pretending. Stop putting on an act. There are no outsiders here. So what if you saved the young master's life with your looks? Becoming a concubine would be an honor. It's just that the young master only loves me, not you. She proudly caressed her slightly swollen belly. Her eyes were full of showing off, as if showing off a cheap toy that was about to disappear. In her previous life, she was like this, using a false identity and appearance to snatch everything from me. This life is still the same, but she doesn't know that the happiness she's flaunting is already a reflection in the mirror. A moon in the water, shattering at a touch. I silently watched Cui Bin. He was also silent, subconsciously avoiding my gaze. He dared not meet my eyes. His evasion already explained everything. Feng Qinlan, you'd better be sensible. It's not like I can't do without you, but when you have no more use, there's only one dead end. Feng Yueao's eyes were fierce and vicious. She directly threatened me. Also, what is your purpose for coming to the princess's manor today? Are you trying to expose me? Young master, I don't think we need her cooperation. Let's just finish her off. At worst, I'll never practice medicine again. I can always muddle through. Feng Yueao became ruthless. She had an air of reckless abandon. Cui Bin, however, immediately shook his head, pulling her back disapprovingly. Yao Yao, you go back first. I'll persuade her. Your body is precious now. You mustn't get upset. Feng Yueao was unwilling just as she was about to speak. A maid's soft urging came from outside. Young mistress, the princess has sent someone to invite you. If you don't go now, you'll be rude. She was helpless and could only glare fiercely at me. She leaned into Cui Bin's ear and whispered, young master, don't you dare be soft-hearted. Think of our child. This is your first child, the future heir to the Marquis' estate. Cui Bin looked at Feng Yueao gently. A genuine emotion flickered in his eyes compared to this perfunctory attitude towards me. His tenderness now was truly sincere. It stung my eyes painfully. The two of them nestled together in front of me, whispering intimately as if I were an irrelevant outsider. Feng Yueao held her head high, giving me a triumphant glance. She turned and left, holding up her skirt. Her retreating figure was still arrogant, yet couldn't hide a trace of panic. After Feng Yueao left, in the shadows behind a rockery, only Cui Bin and I remained. He lowered his head, his tone suddenly filled with guilt, carrying a hint of false remorse. Qinlan, I have wronged you. I know you're back. I know you were the one who saved me on the mountain back then. Yao Yao is carrying my child. I can't abandon her for her sake. As your own sister, please help her, will you? I smiled silently. The laughter was low and mournful, echoing behind the silent rockery. These two are truly a match as husband and wife. They cooperate perfectly, selfish and self-serving. They just want to use a few soft words to control the rest of my life, treating me as a tool to save their own skin. Remembering the previous life, he stubbornly chose Feng Yueao regardless of anything, trampling me completely, letting me be scorned by the world. In this life, he couldn't wait to make up for his regrets. He took Feng Yueao under his wing early. He even didn't hesitate to make me a concubine, married for a month. Yet the child in Feng Yueao's belly was over 2 months old. This eager concern of his, it truly made me see him in a new light. I raised my eyes and looked calmly at Cui Bin. Word by word, I clearly stated the fact that made him feel guilty. The heir and his wife have been married for a month, yet the child is already over 2 months old. The heir's eager concern, it truly moves heaven and earth. Cui Bin's face instantly turned pale. His eyes darted around. He didn't deny my words, clearly. His secret was exposed. He was supposedly concerned at the time and eagerly took Feng Yueao. As for Feng Yueao, she wanted to secure her position as the heir's wife. Fearing Cui Bin would go back on his word, she got pregnant early. Both harbored ulterior motives and clicked perfectly. As early as when Feng Yueao touched me before, I already detected from her subtle pulse and physique this scandalous fact. I just never pointed it out. Now that I've said it, looking at Chui Bin's discomfited appearance, I only felt incredibly satisfied in my heart. Xing Lan, I can promise you anything, even the position of a co-wife, as long as you help Yao Yao. Anything. Chui Bin panicked and quickly offered terms. His tone was full of urgency. I let out a sneer. Without hiding the fact of my rebirth, the hatred in my eyes was clearly visible. Every word was filled with anguish. You also experienced the feeling of being consumed by raging fire. Then I will agree. That great fire in my previous life burned me terribly. That kind of excruciating, bone-deep pain. I'll never forget it as long as I live. Now I'm returning that pain to her. No, I'm returning it to them. Jai Kai trembled all over. Chui Bin trembled all over. His eyes flashed with fear and cowardice. He subconsciously took a step back. He dared not respond to my words. He dared to commit cruel deeds, yet he couldn't bear even a shred of pain. So weak and selfish, it's truly ridiculous. Just then, a female official from the princess's mansion, holding a fly whisk, slowly walked over. Her voice was clear. The princess requests you return to your seat. It's time for the banquet to begin. A trace of alarm flashed across Chui Bin's face. He hadn't noticed when the female official arrived, nor did he know how much she had hurt, yet he dared not do anything to the princess's official. He could only feign composure. Xing Lan, don't act on impulse. Think carefully about what you truly want. I'll wait for you at the banquet. He finished softly, nervously tidying his clothes, and hastily departed with the female official. His retreating figure seemed somewhat like he was fleeing in a panic. I lingered behind the rockery for a moment, patting the dust off my clothes, then slowly walked towards the front courtyard. This good show today, I certainly can't miss it. The princess's banquet was grand beyond compare, with guests gathered like clouds. Almost all the prominent noble families in the capital were present. The peonies under the corridor bloomed in a blaze of color, the red ones like fire, the pink ones like rosy clouds, yet they couldn't compare to the complexity of the hearts at the banquet. I only knew of the right prime minister's daughter, who was at odds with Feng Yueao, but I hadn't expected that more than 10 young ladies who were not on good terms with her and their mothers were all present at the banquet. Everyone's face wore a smile, but their eyes hid calculations. Tea and pastries were served one by one. The maids quietly and neatly arranged them. The princess sat upright in the main seat, raising a hand to signal for everyone to partake. Today, the peonies are in full bloom. All of you need not be constrained. Please enjoy yourselves freely. As soon as Feng Yueao sat down, she picked up an osmanthus barley cake and took a small bite. Her posture was elegant, yet she couldn't hide the unease in her eyes. She constantly scanned her surroundings with her peripheral vision, fearing someone might suddenly cause trouble. That look of a guilty conscience falling into everyone's eyes only added to the amusement. Just then, the princess suddenly looked at a lady beside her, her tone carrying a hint of apology. This princess was negligent. I just learned that Madame Lu is pregnant. This barley cake is cooling, and pregnant women should not eat it. Quickly have someone replace. Feng Yueao's face instantly changed dramatically. She abruptly spat out the pastry from her mouth, frantically wiping the corners of her mouth with a handkerchief. Her movements were crude, completely lacking her usual composure. She even disregarded her image, reaching out to scratch her throat, wanting to throw up all the pastries she had eaten, fearing she might harm the child in her womb. This scene was clearly witnessed by the princess. The princess immediately became displeased, her slender brows slightly furrowed, her tone carrying a hint of reprimand. Does the crown princess find this princess's pastries unpalatable? The crown prince truly dotes on his wife, not even letting her learn a shred of etiquette. Such impoliteness at a royal banquet. What kind of decorum would that be if word got out? This was publicly scolding Feng Yueao for her lack of manners, showing no respect for the Marquis' residence. Chui Bin's face was awkward, sitting to the side, wanted to speak up in defense, but couldn't find a reason, could only clench his fists tightly, his face alternating between green and pale. I wasn't surprised at all. I subtly curved my lips. Feng Yueao was originally the daughter of a minor official, inexperienced in the ways of the world, spoiled and pampered by her parents since childhood. She didn't understand the importance of the bigger picture at all. All she cared about was protecting her own child and maintaining her current glory and wealth. In the past, she hadn't encountered anyone nobler than herself. With Chui Bin protecting her, she hadn't made any major blunders. Today was different from the past. The princess was clearly targeting her intentionally. She naturally couldn't cope. Chui Bin didn't have time to stop her. Feng Yueao had already started explaining frantically on her own. Your Royal Highness, please forgive me. Your humble servant just remembered that I am also pregnant and cannot consume these cold-natured foods. I did not find your Royal Highness's pastry unpalatable. I still hope your Royal Highness will forgive me. Her tone was urgent, with a hint of flattery, but it only made her seem more guilty. Miss Li, the Prime Minister's daughter, immediately chimed in, her tone carrying a hint of sarcasm. Everyone says the Crown Princess Consort's medical skills are miraculous, capable of bringing the dying back to life. Why did Her Royal Highness have to remind you before you realized the pastry couldn't be eaten? Could it be that the miraculous medical skills rumored outside are all fake? With a single sentence, the atmosphere at the banquet instantly ignited. Everyone's gaze focused on Feng Yueao, with scrutiny, mockery, And Schadenfreude. Feng Yueao's face flushed crimson. She wanted to talk back, but was fiercely stopped by Cui Bin's gaze. Her gaze darted around frantically and immediately fixed on me, who was watching the commotion from the corner. A hint of malice flashed in her eyes instantly. She forced a smile onto her face. Who says my medical skills are fake? Everyone present. Does anyone here understand medicine? Dare to compete with me? Immediately, someone at the banquet stood up. It was an elegantly dressed lady. She curtsied slightly. My husband serves in the Imperial Academy of Medicine. I have studied medicine with my husband for a few years, knowing only a little. I dare to wish to learn a thing or two from the princess consort. This imperial physician's wife was precisely the one who testified for me in my previous life. She is an upright person with exquisite medical skills. She detests those who show off and deceive the most. Her stepping forward today clearly shows she has long been displeased with Feng Yueao's action. Feng Yueao panicked inwardly. She doesn't understand medicine at all. How could she dare to compete with anyone? She immediately pointed at me, as if grasping a lifesaver. My sister has studied medicine with me for a few years. She also knows a little. She can spar with the lady on my behalf. Everyone's gaze instantly fell upon me. Mixed with curiosity and doubt, Feng Yueao took a few steps forward, forcibly took my hand, and dragged me to the banquet table, leaning close to my ear. Her voice was cold and fierce. Sister, compete well. If you win, I'll grant you a wish. If you lose, neither of us will have an easy time. No one will have an easy time. She forcefully pushed me forward while she retreated behind Cui Bin, looking as if victory was already in her grasp. The princess did not stop them. Instead, she raised her hand, signaling with great interest. Since that's the case, let's begin. I, too, wish to see what kind of medical skills the disciple taught by the princess consort possesses. In Feng Yueao's memory, I was the timid and submissive second daughter of the Feng family who dared not talk back even when bullied. Her status was lower than that of her headmate. She was accustomed to bossing me around from childhood to adulthood. She always made me take the blame for everything. I had never refused her. The only time I ever defied her was regarding Cui Bin's marriage. She was certain I would still be as obedient and compliant as before and wouldn't dare betray her. She didn't know that I was no longer the soft persimmon she could easily manipulate, living another life. What I sought was never a temporary victory or defeat. It was to make them pay a heavy price. The imperial physician's wife slowly began. The first question she posed was about the crucial aspects of suturing arrow wounds. It was precisely the core technique used when treating Cui Bin, and a secret Feng Yueao could never know. This question was somewhat difficult. Even ordinary medical students might not be able to answer it, let alone someone Feng Yueao claimed only had a superficial understanding of medicine. Like me, I didn't hesitate in the slightest. My tone was calm, my voice composed, and I answered each question clearly and systematically, from reduction techniques to suturing stitches, and then to post-operative care. Every single detail was perfectly precise. I even specifically mentioned the exact locations of the 7 arrows on Cui Bin's body and the emergency treatment methods for his excessive blood loss at the time. These details, only the person who truly performed the rescue would know. I articulated every single word clearly. The imperial physician's wife's expression grew increasingly solemn. Her hand, holding the folding fan, subtly tightened. Slowly, she stopped asking questions. She merely stared fixedly at me, her eyes filled with shock and bewilderment. The others didn't understand medicine, so naturally, they couldn't grasp the nuances of our contest. They only saw my relaxed expression. While the imperial physician's wife remained silent, the hall instantly fell silent. The atmosphere became somewhat eerie. Cui Bin's expression also grew increasingly grim. He clearly picked up on the details in my words. Those were secrets only the person who saved him would know. The princess looked at Feng Yueao. Her tone was indifferent. Crown Princess, do you approve of your sister's answer? Cui Bin furrowed his brows. He already sensed that something was amiss. He quickly signaled to Feng Yueao with his eyes to answer slowly, to stabilize the situation first. But Feng Yueao was already carried away by her pride. She completely failed to understand Cui Bin's hint. She nodded impatiently. Her tone was proud. Of course, someone I taught naturally wouldn't be bad. Madam, you should just concede. The imperial physician's wife sighed softly, slowly shook her head. Her voice carried a hint of regret. Miss Feng's answer, not a single word was correct. It didn't sound like she had studied medicine at all. Rather, it sounded like she was talking nonsense. A single word, a bombshell. The banquet hall instantly erupted. Whispers and discussions rose and fell. What? It was all wrong. Isn't the crown princess a divine doctor? How could someone she taught be so incompetent? It seems the rumors outside are indeed false. The details Miss Foam just mentioned actually sounded like she had genuinely saved someone. I lowered my head at the opportune moment and curtsied with a flustered expression. My tone was timid and innocent. This commoner does not know medicine. What I said just now was indeed made up. I hope all you madams and young ladies will forgive me. I paused. I looked up at the princess. My voice voice was clear, spreading throughout the entire banquet. And I am not the second miss of the Fong family. Lord Fong has already stated clearly, I am the child he adopted from the outskirts and have no relation to the Fong family today. I disguised myself and ventured into the princess's residence because I wanted to take advantage of the crowd, hoping to find my birth parents. I begged the princess to grant my wish. Every word I said was sincere, with a hint of desolate helplessness in my eyes. Instantly, I gained the sympathy of many ladies at the banquet. Fong Yueyao didn't believe a word I said, thinking I was deliberately betraying her. She frantically stood up from her seat, rushed over to me, and raised her hand, intending to slap me. She shrieked piercingly, "You're lying. You are my sister. You did this on purpose. You want to ruin me." Before her hand could fall, she was stopped by Cui Bin. Cui Bin's face could not have been worse. It was ashen. His eyes were filled with regret and anger. He began to regretting that he had mistakenly trusted Fong Yueyao at first, regretting that for her sake he had abandoned me, who had truly saved him. He regretted even more marrying Fong Yueyao into the Marquis' estate, making the Marquis' estate a laughingstock throughout the capital. He thought that even if Fong Yueyao's medical skills were fake, she could deceive people for a long time, at least not be exposed publicly at such a grand occasion as the princess's residence. But he didn't expect Fong Yueyao to be so foolish. She personally pushed herself into the abyss. The more Fong Yueyao spoke, the more mistakes she made. The more she did, the more mistakes she made. She had long since disgraced the Marquis' estate. Most of the noble families were shrewd individuals. By now, they already understood that Fong Yueyao was a complete fraud. Those noble families who had once given valuable and generous gifts were secretly resentful of the Marquis' estate for deceiving those above and below them. Their gazes were unfriendly, and they were already plotting how to seize an opportunity for revenge. Cui Bin dared not let Fong Yueyao speak any further, gripping her waist, pulling her by the waist, pressing her back into her seat, scolding in a low voice, "Don't speak. Pretend to faint." Following Cui Bin's reminder, Fong Yueyao finally resorted to her most practiced trick. She closed her eyes. Her body went limp, collapsing directly onto the chair, feigning unconsciousness. Seeing this, the princess, a sarcastic smile curled at the corners of her lips, her tone light. "How could she faint just like that? Physician madam, quickly examine her. Heaven forbid someone dies at my banquet." The princess's status outranked the heir's. Cui Bin had no time to think of an excuse to refuse. The physician madam had already stepped forward, gently taking Fong Yueyao's wrist. A moment later, the physician madam stood up and reporting to your highness, the heir consort is over 2 months pregnant. Her pregnancy is unstable. Now, with her emotions raging, that is why she fainted. There is no serious danger. The princess feigned surprise and chuckled. Over 2 months. You say, well, congratulations. Congratulations, heir. Quickly take the heir consort back to rest. Carefully nurture the pregnancy. When the heir consort wakes up, remember to let her think carefully about those questions the physician madam posed, how they should truly be answered so others won't make fun of her again. The sarcasm in her words was self-evident. Cui Bin gritted his teeth, his face extremely grim. He could only awkwardly pick up Fong Yueyao, hastily bid farewell to the princess, turned and left. Before leaving, he looked at me for a long time with an inscrutable expression. In his eyes, there was regret, resentment, unwillingness, and a hint of concern that even he hadn't noticed. Not until he was urged by a maid did he leave. Looking back every few steps, his retreating figure was lonely and disheveled. The princess deliberately ignored me. She raised her hand to the crowd. Her smile was gentle and graceful. "Just a small interlude. It won't affect your enjoyment. Have them continue serving refreshments." The banquet proceeded as usual. The lively atmosphere quickly returned to the banquet. However, everyone's topic of conversation had turned into Fong Yueyao's scandal of impersonating a divine physician and being pregnant before marriage. I stood in the corner, listening to their discussions. My heart was utterly calm. This is just the beginning. What they owe me is far from enough. I was led by a female official from the princess's mansion into a side courtyard. The courtyard was extremely quiet, with several green bamboos planted. A faint scent of medicine wafted in the air. No matter how I pressed her, the female official kept her head down and remained silent. She just stood guard at the door, not allowing me to leave. I felt puzzled, so I stopped asking. I gently pushed open the room door. The light in the room was soft, filled with a strong medicinal scent and a faint scent of blood. A man was sitting up in bed, dressed in a dark brocade robe. His face was pale, yet he couldn't conceal his noble demeanor. Hearing the movement, the man looked up. His gaze was profound, with a touch of gentleness. I walked forward. My eyes widened instantly. My footsteps halted. It was the man I had rescued in the mountain forest some time ago. The man I had saved. He was shirtless. On the gauze over his wound, fresh blood was seeping through. Clearly, the wound had reopened. A figure suddenly emerged from the shadows, kneeling on the ground, his voice respectful. Your Highness's injuries had already stabilized, but a few days ago, there was an assassination attempt in the palace, and Your Highness rashly used force, which caused the wound to reopen. Please, Young lady, treat His Highness. I looked back and immediately recognized the person speaking was the head of the Imperial Medical Institute. It was the same imperial physician who, in my previous life, was ordered to have me treat the noble person. I clutched the corner of my clothes and gave a bitter smile in my heart. My luck is truly poor to encounter such a small coincidence. I had longed day and night for the royal family to invite Feng Yue out to treat the noble person so that her treatment would fail and implicate the Marquis' residence, preferably landing her and Cui Bin in prison together. Unexpectedly, I actually intercepted it myself and personally saved him. The person I failed to save in my previous life, I ended up saving in this life. It's truly ridiculous. I didn't know whom to hate. Tears streamed down my face. The tears on my collar spread into a wet stain. I remembered in my previous life, I tried my best to save this noble person, but because my hands were injured by my parents, I was mocked by the imperial physicians for being delusional and ultimately met a miserable end. In this life, I clearly only wanted to stand by and watch, yet fate still pushed me to the forefront. Gu Yuanrui looked at me helplessly. He wanted to raise his hand to comfort me, but as soon as he lifted it, it affected his wound. His brows furrowed slightly. The creases deepened a little more. I quickly wiped away my tears. I quickly stepped forward, gently untying the gauze on his body. Looking at his ghastly wound, I said softly, "Never mind, since I've saved him, I'll see it through. Just consider it my fate to fail in my calculation." Fortunately, Feng Yueao was also completely exposed today, and her fate won't be good. At least my efforts weren't wasted. My mood calmed slightly. I looked up at Gu Yuanrui, my tone holding a hint of playful blame. "The medical tools you took from me, can you return them to me now? Those are my livelihood." Gu Yuanrui nodded gently, a hint of a smile appearing in his eyes. The imperial physician immediately walked in, holding a tray with both hands. Inside, neatly arranged, were all my missing medical tools. They were wiped spotlessly clean. Even my commonly used small surgical knife was maintained to a gleaming shine. I hesitated for a moment. I did not avoid the head imperial physician, allowing him to stand by and learn throughout the process while treating the wound. I casually answered questions and clarified doubts. My medical skills came from my master and were completely different from current medical practices. Bold yet precise, the head physician grew more and more astonished as he listened. His eyes filled with admiration when he looked at me. He even took out paper and pen and silently jotted down every key point I mentioned. It was then that I realized the person I had saved was the second prince, Gu Yuanrui, the emperor's most favored prince, the empress's legitimate son. His status was incredibly noble. Later, the hidden guards secretly informed me that the emperor had taken my birth characters for our imperial preceptor to interpret, wanting to see if a marriage could be formed between me and Gu Yuanrui. Upon hearing this, my heart became uneasy. I couldn't help but curse the imperial preceptor in my heart. I don't know if he can calculate accurately, but his so-called prophecy already ruined me in my previous life. In this life, I will never again be manipulated by fate. Gu Yuanrui didn't tell me how the imperial advisor interpreted the characters. He just looked at me with a serious gaze. "I promise you a future, Qinglan. I promise you a future of freedom. No one will be able to bully you again. Everything at the princess's mansion today was arranged by me. Those who impersonated you and bullied you will naturally be punished." My heart trembled. So, from beginning to end, everything was under his control. The day I met Gu Yuanrui, he already had secret guards by his side. When I was treating him in the cave, my bold treatment methods repeatedly made the secret guards want to kill me. If Gu Yuanrui hadn't stopped them in time, my life would have been lost long ago. After Gu Yuanrui woke up, hearing the secret guards describe my appearance and medical skills and connecting it to the rumors of the divine physician Feng Yueao circulating in the capital, he instantly saw through the Feng family's scheme. He also understood Cui Bin's intention to let the mistake continue. Originally, Gu Yuanrui's injuries had already improved, but assassins suddenly appeared in the palace, targeting him directly. To protect the emperor, he rashly engaged in combat, which led to his wounds worsening again. Even if I hadn't come to the princess's mansion, these people would have already found my whereabouts and brought me back to the capital for treatment. Knowing I was going to the princess's mansion to watch the commotion, he specifically arranged all of this. He both helped me expose Feng Yueao's true colors and naturally allowed me to treat him. "Miss Feng Heir, this is my sincerity." Gu Yuanrui looked at me. A different kind of affection appeared in his eyes, gentle and sincere, but I was no longer willing to take risks. Having experienced betrayal and hardship in my previous life, my heart had long turned to ashes regarding matters of love. I only wanted to guard my medical skills and live a peaceful life. I pretended not to understand his affection and lowered my head, focusing on treating the wound, no longer speaking. Once I had completely healed Gu Yuanroy's wound, I immediately proposed to leave. Gu Yuanroy did not stop me. He merely sent someone to escort me secretly and gave me a token that allowed free access to the prince's residence so I could study medicine whenever I wished. The scandal at the princess's residence was quickly spread, embellished with exaggerations. By the time I heard the rumors on the streets, things had already changed drastically. Everyone said Cui Bin and Feng Yueyao had secretly conceived a child. In order to be together, Cui Bin faked an injury and deliberately fabricated Feng Yueyao's identity as a divine doctor, deceiving everyone in the capital. Even the Marquis, who had always been innocent, was said to be an accomplice. The Marquis's reputation plummeted overnight, becoming the laughingstock of the entire capital. He was pointed at and talked about whenever he walked on the street. I heard. After the Marquis learned the truth, he was so furious he flew into a raid and personally punished Cui Bin, beating him so badly he could barely get up, and confined him to the mansion for self-reflection in the Marquis's ancestral hall. The Marquis knelt for a long time before the ancestral tablets, unable to rise, regretting his poor judgment of character and ruining the Marquis's century-old reputation. I heard Feng Yueyao was never again invited to banquets by any noble family. Those who had flattered her and surrounded her in the past all avoided her like the plague, becoming up rat crossing the street that everyone shouts at. She wanted to go out for a stroll to clear her mind, but was driven away by the common people on the roadside, could only hide in the Marquis's residence courtyard all day, bathing in tears. I heard that my father, a sixth-rank official, because he failed to properly raise his daughter and deceived the Marquis's residence and the royal family, was punished by the emperor. For this matter, he was punished by the emperor. He was directly expelled from the capital, exiled to a remote area, never to return to the capital for eternity. The Feng family's mansion was confiscated. Their former glory and wealth turned into nothing overnight. On the day my parents left the capital, I personally went to see them off. Gu Yuanroy was worried and insisted on staying by my side. At the post station, my parents' clothes were tattered and worn, their faces haggard. Long gone was their former splendor. Their luggage was just a single worn-out bundle. Inside were a few changes of clothes. Where was there any trace of their former appearance as an official's family? Seeing the noble and extraordinary Gu Yuanroy accompanying me, their eyes instantly lit up. They thought I had become Gu Yuanroy's person and quickly knelt on the ground, kowtowing to me repeatedly, crying and wailing, admitting their mistake. Xinglan, my good daughter, your parents know they were wrong. You are our own flesh and blood. Please save your parents. Don't let us go to that remote place. You're a piece of flesh that fell from your mother's body. When your mother denied your identity back then, it was all out of necessity. Your mother thought your elder sister was beautiful and could win over the Marquis's heir. Once she established herself in the Marquis's residence, she would bring prosperity to our family, and then we would find a good husband for you. That's right, your parents never thought of abandoning you. After you left, father and mother cried for several days. We've been sending people to look for you all this time. They cried themselves hoarse with sincere emotion, but my heart remained unmoved. Look for me? In every street and alley, I never saw a single drawing of me being sought. Not a single person ever came looking for me. From childhood to adulthood, my food, clothing, and daily necessities were always my sister's unwanted leftovers. In their eyes, there was only Feng Yueyao. They never acknowledged me, their second daughter. At 6, I was injured saving Feng Yueyao. They never felt an ounce of pity. I studied medical arts day and night. They never even spared me a glance. Until that day, when to protect Feng Yueyao, they personally denied my identity and devalued me to nothing. I had already cut off my last shred of hope for them. I took out 300 taels of silver from my sleeve and gently placed them before them. My tone was calm and unwavering. Although I haven't found my birth parents, the kindness of your upbringing, I would never dare to forget. This silver is my gratitude to the two of you. Now, I am the second prince's personal physician. My medical skills are too advanced. Without protection, with the second prince as my backing, I can freely research medical arts and save those who can be saved. Instead of being an exclusive physician to officials and nobles, father and mother looked at the 300 taels of silver. Then they looked at Gu Yuanroy beside me. They cried even more miserably. They clung to my sleeve, refusing to let go. Xinglan, my dearest daughter, please forgive us. We'll never dare to do it again. I gently pulled my sleeve back and took a step back, curtsied. The silver has been given. My debt of upbringing is repaid. In this life, we shall not meet again. No matter how they cried and wailed or how they pleaded, I smiled and waved. I watched with my own eyes as the guards dragged them onto the carriage, fading into the distance, disappearing from sight. My heart felt no reluctance, only complete relief. Gu Yuanroy stood by my side, gently patted my shoulder, silently comforting me. Soon after, war broke out again at the border. War raged, The people were displaced. Gu Yuanrui voluntarily petitioned the emperor to lead troops to war. He specifically came to find me. His tone was sincere. Qinglan, come with me to the border. There will be many injured soldiers in the army for you to practice and improve your medical skills. There aren't many rules there. All that matters is survival. It suits you well. I was persuaded by him. The grievances in the capital were settled. I also wanted to find a place to focus on studying medicine and save more innocent people to fulfill my master's dying wish. Although the border winds and sand were strong, it could keep me away from the troubles of the capital to truly live for myself. Coincidentally, Cui Bin was also among the expeditionary forces. He already held a military position. This expedition, he wanted to use his military merit to earn an imperial decree for our marriage, he thought. As long as Feng Yueyao was gone, I would return to his side. But he didn't know I already hated him to the core, and Feng Yueyao's child was ultimately not born successfully. Her pride was immense, and she couldn't withstand the world's mockery and neglect. As glorious as she once was, she fell just as terribly later on. At a small banquet in the palace, she got into an argument with someone. During the dispute and shoving, she accidentally knocked into a candle holder. Her skirt was instantly set ablaze. Everyone was in a panic, yet no one stepped forward to rescue her immediately. And Cui Bin was not far away, yet he deliberately delayed. He watched her being engulfed by the flames. He even secretly instructed his servants not to rush to her rescue. His excuse was fear of disturbing the fetus, but in reality, he had long grown tired of Feng Yueyao. He wanted to use this fire to get rid of this woman who brought shame to the Marquis' manor. Ultimately, Feng Yueyao, due to the delay in rescue, met with an untimely end. Her tragic state was exactly the same as mine in the previous life. Her wails before death echoed throughout the entire Marquis' manor, yet not a single person shed a genuine tear for her. After Feng Yueyao's death, Cui Bin excitedly ran up to me, like a child who had been set free. His tone was frantic. Qinglan, I'm free. Feng Yueyao is gone. She met with an untimely end, but this time, I won't target you. I will protect you. Let's start over, okay? I ignored his frantic rambling, turned and boarded the carriage, heading for the border. All the way there, no matter how Cui Bin ran up to me to confess his feeling for how he boasted of his deep affection, I stayed hidden in the carriage, never paying him any mind. Gu Yuanrui sat beside me, watching Cui Bin persistently follow outside the window. His tone was rather sour. Aren't you moved? I thought you used to like him. I shook my head gently. My eyes were clear. What is there to like about him? Mistaking fish eyes for pearls for his cruel treatment of his wife, Cui Bin thought I didn't know. Feng Yueyao could have been rescued. It was his deliberate delay that led to Feng Yueyao's misfortune. This so-called loving couple ended up just calculating against each other. Neither of them was any good. Watching them turn against each other, I only felt incredibly relieved. So-called love, in the face of life and death and self-interest, has always been vulnerable. The battlefield is cruel. Blades have no eyes. Smoke and gunpowder filled the air. Mangled limbs were everywhere. Wails of agony were incessant. Here, there was none of the intrigue and deception of the capital, but there was the most direct test of life and death. I set up a temporary medical tent in the army, bringing a few young soldiers learning medicine. We treated the wounded tirelessly day and night. The medical skills my master taught me finally had a chance to be put to good use. Before long, Cui Bin was severely wounded again. His mouth was pierced by a long spear, barely clinging to life, just like when he was on the mountain. When I saved him, he looked exactly the same. To snatch military honors, he recklessly charged into the enemy formation and ended up in this state. He truly brought it upon himself. He sent his personal guards to desperately find me. They knelt before me, pleading bitterly, begging me to save Cui Bin. The personal guards kowtowed until their heads bled, crying profusely, Miss Feng, please, save the young master. He knows he was wrong. He's always regretted it. But at that time, I was busy treating a 15-year-old soldier who was severely wounded. His parents both died in the war. He was all alone. If I didn't treat him in time, he would die on the spot. Before human life, there's no distinction between noble and humble. I couldn't abandon this innocent young man just to save Cui Bin. Without lifting my head, I told the personal guard, I can't save him. You should find someone else more capable. The personal guard wanted to plead further, but Gu Yuanrui's hidden guards pulled him out. Gu Yuanrui walked over to me and handed me a bowl of warm water. Don't be troubled. You did nothing wrong. By the time I had completely cured the young soldier and later learned of the situation, by the time I rushed over, the optimal time for treatment had already passed. I am not a true immortal. I don't possess the art of bringing the dead back to life. Cui Bin lay in the tent, his face as pale as paper, his breath weak. Knowing his end was near, he suddenly smiled instead. His laughter was both sorrowful and relieved. The imperial advisor was right. I wouldn't live past 20 in 2 lives. I couldn't live past 20. It's heaven's will. Ultimately, I got what I deserved. I understood Cui Bin's words. He also carried memories from his previous life. Unfortunately, I died too early in my previous life and didn't know his ultimate fate. Now, there was no need to ask. He looked at me, his eyes filled with regret and apology. Using his last ounce of strength, He only uttered the most useless phrase, "I'm sorry." He then breathed his last and never opened his eyes again. I stood in the tent, looking at his cold body. Without shedding a single tear, I turned and left, expressionless, immediately immersing myself in treating the next wave of wounded here. Melancholy and sorrow are the most superfluous emotions. Life and death, parting, are enacted every day. All I can do is to grip what's in my hands and save more people who can be saved. Sunlight pierced through the gaps in the tent, falling upon me, warm and bright. In this new life, I have finally broken free from the hatred and shackles of my previous life, no longer trapped by love, no longer hurt by family ties. I have my healing arts at hand. I have Gu Yuanroi's protection. I have a free future ahead for the rest of my life. I will only be Feng Qinglan, who heals the wounded, not living for anyone else, but only for myself. Those who wronged me, those who hurt me, have ultimately received their deserved retribution, and I will ultimately, in this mortal world, live as the person I most want to be.